Have you ever wondered why astronauts don't make frequent trips to other planets or even stars? If you have, what do you think is the reason? Well, the answer is that no technology is able to allow it. The space is very big and this makes it hard to take trips. For instance, to make it to the nearest star from Earth, you would need to travel for 4 years. It is unimaginable to travel in space for 4 years, and so scientists have been working tirelessly to develop a technology that could solve this problem. It has been decades of theories and inventions, and finally it seems like all hope is not lost because light-speed technology is underway. What would light-speed technology be able to do? Would it be possible to travel to a star or planet without having to worry about travel time? Watch this video to the end to find out the answers to these questions. The name of this light-speed technology is a warp drive, and it would be every bit essential for traveling at light speed. If you love Star Trek movies and you've watched Star Trek, you should be familiar with the term warp drive. Many people have speculated that the warp drive actually originated from Star Trek, but it didn't. It was first used in a story called The Flight of the Starling in Amazon Stories in 1948. However, Star Trek really helped to popularize it. In The Flight of the Starling, 2 test pilots try out this new warp drive, which allows ships to travel close to the speed of light and finally open the door to interstellar travel while in the Star Trek universe. Warp drive is the favored method of faster-than-light propulsion by every interstellar civilization you're likely to meet. You'll notice that both stories have the same theories. Well, these principles would no longer be fiction because they would be used in developing the warp drive. To comprehend how the warp drive technology would work, let's start with explaining the warp drive theory. The theory is basically about bending time and space with enough energy. The concept was created by Miguel Alcubierre and is popularly known as the Alcubierre drive in 1994. According to Alcubierre, rather than exceeding the speed of light with the local reference frame, which is a perspective you can use to determine if an object is missing or not, a spacecraft would traverse distances by contracting space in front of it and expanding space behind it, resulting in an effective faster-than-light travel. Based on this theory, this is how the warp drive technology would work. Space-time on one side of the spacecraft would expand while the other side would contract thanks to the incredible amounts of energy being used. The idea is to compress the space between you and the planet you want to go to. This can be done by creating a bubble of flat space-time around the spaceship and curving space-time around the bubble to reduce distances, so technically, it would be like you are not going to the star or whichever planet you want to go to, the star would instead be coming at you. This is where things get very interesting. Due to this bubble created, the spaceship would be able to operate outside of physics. Already, the Alcubierre theory is based on a loophole from Einstein's theory of relativity. We know the theory of relativity states that nothing can travel faster than light, but by applying creativity, this loophole was found. According to Albert Einstein's relativity theory, we live in a 4-dimensional space-time. This means that space-time is not static, and so everything that moves through space-time can accelerate only up to the speed limit set by light. Essentially, space-time bends in response to the existence of matter and energy. Einstein's theory explained how 2 things move through space, and warp drive uses this analogy to build off the warp drive. Alcubierre denoted based on this theory that if space-time were contracted in front of a spaceship and expanded behind it to compensate, it would be possible to travel to one's destination in a speed faster than light. He likened it to being on a passenger conveyor belt at an airport. Imagine that the floor behind you is being created out of nothing. At the same time, when you look at your front, the floor is being destroyed. You would have no option other than to move along. I know this analogy can be a little confusing, but what you need to understand from all these is that it would be like no acceleration is being made. All of these are theories though, bringing them to reality wouldn't be a piece of cake. These are certain problems associated with how this drive would work. One of the problems of how to stop traveling faster than the speed of light and return to flat space-time when you reach your destination. Not to mention, Hawking's radiation would obliterate any travelers in a bubble of warp drive. The reason for this is that Hawking's radiation reduces the mass and rotational energy of black holes, and is therefore also theorized to cause black hole evaporation. Because of this, black holes that do not gain mass through other means are expected to shrink and ultimately vanish. In terms of the bubble in a warp drive, since the forward and rear drives, the inside of the warp bubble becomes flat, making anything inside destroyed. Due to this, travelers using a bubble of warp drive would be very difficult or almost impossible. There is also the problem of no one knowing how to produce such negative large energy, because for you to be able to compress or warp spacetime, you need negative energy. A warp drive would use the amount of mass to create an imbalance between particles and antiparticles. This imbalance would now result in negative energy density and create the spacetime bubble. The major and sad part of this, though, is how to produce negative energy. The amount of mass needed to create negative energy is impractical because, for instance, you want to create a 100-meter bubble. You would need the mass of the entire universe, and if this happened, where would you and I live? Right now, there is no known mechanism on Earth capable of creating this amount of negative energy needed. Not to worry though, there seems to be hope as the psychiatrist Eric Lentz offered a different approach to solve this problem. In his paper, he showed how positive energy is enough to create a warp drive bubble if you take advantage of hyperbolic spacetime rather than linear. Following this, a warp drive wouldn't need to use negative energy. Lentz described how a warp drive might work by using a concept called a solutin, which travels as a wave function in spacetime. In contrast to Alcubierre's theory, where the universe is expanded behind the ship and contracted in front of it, in Lentz's theory, both expansion and contraction take place around and in all directions of the soliton entity. The soliton itself is curved spacetime, which remains stable throughout the process. You may be wondering that if it were possible to generate this sufficient amount of energy required for a warp drive, what would it mean for the traveler? Well, according to Eric Lentz, no time paradoxes would occur. If a person traveled for 9 years from Earth to Proxima Centauri, for instance, the same amount of time would have passed on Earth as on the spacecraft because of the lack of acceleration experienced by the space travelers. Lentz suggested that creating this type of space bubble would only need conventional energy production techniques. If this is true, then NASA could travel at great speeds and even more at the speed of light, while not needing more energy. This would mean that the long-time dream of man satisfying his insatiable need for exploring the universe can be achieved. Fingers are crossed, because Lentz could have just given NASA the solution to this problem they've been trying to solve for a while. NASA is definitely more focused now than ever. Whenever they use the Lentz approach or not, one thing is for sure, NASA is not giving up on developing this warp drive. This isn't just a mere say. An internal report from inside the agency suggests that they are taking the concept of folding space and time very seriously now. They are being discreet about this, but sources say that they are working hard at solving challenges preventing this drive from being a success. Aside from the problems already mentioned in this video, another challenge that they would likely have to face is the fact that traveling with the warp drive at such high speeds could be very dangerous to the ship and everyone inside because the ship would be going too fast. This insane speed can make the ship be hit by a lot of dangerous particles as it moves. This implies that the ship flying at this pace would need specially made shields to protect it and everyone on board. Also, if the ship is expected to be going at an insane amount of speed, who would drive it? Just like cars and airplanes have pilots, we should expect that someone would be responsible for handling this technology, which by the way, would be very difficult to navigate through. All these questions and problems NASA is trying to solve. It seems impossible to achieve it right now, but we know now that even impossible becomes possible. Not too long ago, we thought it was impossible to land on the moon, but Apollo 11 did this in 1969. To get more updates on how this goes, be sure to check this channel. Like this video if you think it is actually possible for NASA to succeed in fully bringing the warp drive to life in years to come without any form of side effects. That's it for today's video. See you in the next one.